Hi, it's Super Videos back at you for another Q&A video. Today's Q&A video is going to be only Walking Dead show questions. So let's get started. The first question comes from Julian Mackenzie, and they ask, do you think it can't be Carl in the POV view when their head gets bashed in because it looks like they have two eyes? So the POV shot is a very common filmmaking technique that's widely used, but it's not common for POV shots to be accurate about the vision they show. For example, it's not common to have one side be black because someone is blind in one eye, or to have hair be in the way of the shot because the person has long hair in their face. A proof of this is actually back in the first half of season 6 when pre-burn-faced Dwight captures Daryl. When Daryl wakes up, it's a POV shot, but we never see any hair in the way of the shot. But Daryl has hair in his face. So the same thing can be applied to the Carl eye theory. So to answer the question, we can't really use the POV shot itself as compelling evidence to prove or disprove the safety of any of our characters. The next question comes from Clifford Batteau. This answer contains some comic spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled for the comic book, mute the video right now and just fast forward to the next question. So the question, do you think Negan in All Out War may kill Dwight and Daryl will take his role in the show as the leader of the Saviors? So if Daryl makes it past the Lucille scene, which I strongly believe that he will, he must avenge Denise's death in some way. Now it's entirely possible for Daryl to be in a scenario where he witnesses what Dwight may have gone through and how Negan treats him, which will cause him to forgive him in the meantime and work with him to take Negan down. But I think it would be great remixing of the comic book if they choose to have Negan kill Dwight in All Out War, and once the war is over, get Daryl to lead the Saviors. Even though Daryl killing Dwight will seem more satisfying to fans, we would feel more sympathy for Dwight if Negan was the one to do it. Now, there's a major problem with this theory. If this was to happen, Negan will be hated more than they want him to be hated. And Dwight, being a favorite comic character, will be killed before his comic arc gets executed in the TV show. Some of these arcs can't actually be given to Daryl because of the difference in their past. Also, it's unrealistic to think that the Saviors will even listen to Daryl, because remember, they never really accepted Dwight as their leader either. So this will be a very interesting thing to see, but the risk of walking themselves in a corner like they did with Andrea's death may cause them to actually stay away from this story arc and do something entirely different. The next question comes from Exploding Pig, and they ask, what do you think will happen when Rick first hears about Ezekiel? So there are two scenarios that could happen. One is Rick being introduced to Ezekiel by Jesus like he did in the comic book, or two, being introduced to him by Carol and Morgan, who are actually headed to the kingdom as far as we know. So if the first scenario was to happen, Rick would definitely be skeptical about the true nature of Ezekiel's community, given that Rick would not even trust Jesus and Gregory at this point after coming out of the confrontation in the season 6 finale. If the second scenario happens, he may feel more trusting of their community, especially if Carol says good things about them. But either way, I think he will be very cautious with his decision to trust new people he meets and new communities he stumbles upon. The next question comes from Agnes, and they ask, was the event leading to the Lucille scene done in the comic book? And the event is Glenn stepping up as Negan acted like he was going to kill Maggie or beat Maggie. And if it wasn't, will it change the outcome? No, that event was actually not done in the comic book. In the comic book, nobody really stepped up before the death. I actually like the TV version a little better because of this. It just makes it a little more realistic and more emotional. Also, Glenn was not the only person who stepped up. Rick did also as well, briefly, when Negan was talking to Carl, when he said, just stop this, if you remember. So as far as this changing the outcome of who dies, like saying Glenn can't die now because he stepped up. I don't think that's the case. Now, some people may actually wonder why Negan even did what he did, why he pretended to want to beat Maggie in the first place. I think Negan chose the two more vulnerable and weakest characters in the lineup, Maggie and Carl, to identify the people who will be most affected by harming them. So he actually did that. He realized that by threatening Carl and Maggie, he can control Glenn and Rick. And Rick being the leader, it actually makes it more effective. This also relates back to why Negan may or may not want to kill Glenn at this point. If he does kill Glenn, he's eliminating someone who may be a problem in the future. Someone who's not afraid to speak up and will do anything to protect his loved ones. If he doesn't kill Glenn, then he can control him by threatening Maggie's life. So to me, Negan is sophisticated enough to choose the second option and kill someone other than Carl, Rick, Glenn, and Maggie. So to an extent, it does affect the outcome, but not necessarily. The next question comes from OmEr KhAn, and they ask, do you think that it's possible for more than one person to get Lucilled in the Season 7 premiere? I think it's entirely possible for Negan to kill more than one person in the premiere, but not Lucille both victims. I think that choosing two people to get Lucilled will show that they have no other original ideas for deaths. Also, by doing this, it takes away from the effect of the Lucille death to the point that non-comic readers won't feel the significance of the death. Comic readers will also feel like they've been let down if this happens. Also, it would be overkill since it would make Negan more hated than they want him to be. The last point I want to make is that if they were going to do this, they would make one be a main character and one be a minor character. And the minor character would definitely not be worthy of the Lucille death. So this will also anger the audience and more specifically comic book readers. So because of that, I don't think that we will have multiple Lucille deaths in the premiere. The next question also comes from Clifford Batteau. This answer contains some comic spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled for the comic book, mute the video right now and just fast forward to the next question. And they ask, what if Sasha gets Holly's death or Tara as a second option, and Carol gets Denise's comic death, and Tobin loses his leg, also Rosita romance with Ezekiel? So as far as who's gonna get Holly's comic book death, now that I think about it, I think it makes more sense for it to be Sasha, given her unstable conditions in the past. I don't think Carol is going to get Denise's comic death. I think that Carol will die in All Out War in a heroic fashion. As far as Tobin losing his leg, it could happen. It doesn't really matter. It's not really important in the storyline. They could still stick with Heath or change it with Tobin or someone else. So for the last part of the question, I think they're setting up Rosita and Daryl for a reason, so I don't think that Rosita will have any romantic relationship with Ezekiel. As far as who will, I'm not sure. It's way down the line for us to be predicting at this point. So that's the last question. Leave your questions in the comment section. Make sure you put Q&A before the question so I can find it when I'm scrolling that through the comments. Also, I'm not gonna set a date for the next Q&A. I'm just gonna wait till I have enough questions and then I'll do the next Q&A video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll be back in the next Q&A video.